We're going to be discussing a department's Public Works, Parks and Recreation, the cemetery, and capital plan for FY 2025. So I'll pass it over to our esteemed staff.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. So we're going to start with Public Works. As we did last time, I will cover kind of the highs and lows, just some summary. We're obviously not going line by line. There's a lot in here that is, relatively a minor change or no change. And then Matt is here also, who can answer some more detailed questions, maybe talk about some other initiatives in his department. This is one of the only departments we're seeing this year with any increase in headcount. There is one additional headcount in here for an operator to add another snowplow route, so we'll hear more about that. So, but just starting out on the first page in our Public Works, kind of the big number you'll see jump out is the net city refuse cost, down 54%. This is an increase in our purple bags revenue. Regardless of what you think of purple bags, it's just a statement of what's happened in the past year. $25,000 increase budgeted there for the purple bags. Jumping ahead.
Can you go through that one more time?
I agree.
So our purple bag income
That's
up.
the passion for.
Yeah, yes, that's why I said that, yeah. Up $25,000 in revenue budgeted, so it was therefore a decrease in the net cost to the city to operate.
So just to be clear, we went from a cost last year of $53,312 to a cost projected for FY '25 of $24,482.
So it may be easier, if you go to page 63, line 121 is the bag revenue.
Line what?
Line 121, the pay-as-you-throw bag revenue.
Okay.
So you see we have 350 there, which is an increase of 25,000.
Right.
And that's just, Matt, based on numbers you're seeing.
Yeah, more people are using the program, right? And the costs are essentially the same. The expenses are essentially the same, but we anticipate 25,000 more in revenue. We haven't gone up on bag fees, to be clear. They're the same, $13 per roll.
All right, so I'm going to jump to page on 62. Our next line that's changed a bit, vehicle equipment parts under fleet maintenance, $30,000 increase there, about 15%. This is just basically due to inflation, the cost of everything now. Matt, any particulars on that? Just numbers you're seeing, the cost of repairing vehicles. I think you initially actually requested 60 in that line, and we were able to accommodate 30. So I think it's probably needed in light of inflation and everything else we're seeing.
Could you say what line you're on, please?
Sorry, yeah, line 106 on page 62.
So our fleet maintenance, we don't just take care of Public Works and Parks and Recreation, but citywide vehicles, we have fire, police, sometimes the airport, but it's citywide. We do charge out for parts to different departments, but yeah, we just expect with inflation that it would be much more comfortable if that number went up from the 190 of last year.
So when you say citywide, are you talking about vehicles used in police and
Police
fire?
cruisers, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, fire.
Yeah.
Yeah. The fire equipment, if I'm being honest, it's a little more specialized. We're not always able to help them.
Right.
But oil changes and
Right.
tires and stuff like that, we're
Exactly.
able to handle that, yeah.
Okay.
All right, further questions there? Okay, moving on, we're going to go to page 64, line 166, under operation and maintenance labor costs. So this is our new position that we've added, that you see here. So this is for an additional equipment operator that will allow us to have another snowplow route. Matt, any particular comments on this? But I know obviously as the city grows, we're adding another plow route. And we also talked about, as you know, going to salt priority, which is also a piece of this.
Yep, so we currently have 7 operator positions and 10 plow routes. So 3 of those routes are plowed with the 1-ton, pickup trucks where we don't require a CDL license. We're looking for an equipment operator position, which is a CDL operator, so we can add an 11th route. Having an 11 routes will give us, we'll move some things around as far as how the program looks overall, but having that extra person will cut down the amount of time it takes us to do our routes by about an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours. Our routes right now are between 3.5 and 4 hours long. The standard that municipalities and MDOT want is 2 hours. Our routes are 3.5 to 4 hours. In the SALT priority, I'm definitely 100% behind that program. It's the wave of the future. It's what's happening. It's better. It's more efficient. Over time, and not that much time, but in the short term, it will be more cost-effective to run liquids and salt as opposed to sand. Yeah, I think if that helps.
Yep. So, as I said, besides the library, that was the only new position you'll see in this budget. Moving down, under operation and maintenance operating costs, line 185, road maintenance, you see a jump there. This is going to include line striping. It also includes some monies for, we'll call it skinny coat on some residential side streets, for example, that are in tough shape, that are not in the paving budget. We can put down a lighter coat and get by for maybe 5 to 7 years on a lot of streets that really desperately need some attention. So that's been increased here. As we've talked about, infrastructure, roads, sidewalks need to be a priority here. We're well behind with maintenance, well behind with funding, and this is going to help us make some small incremental progress toward getting our roads and sidewalks up to par. Also, you see we have 90,000 in sand and salt. This also goes with the salt priority we just discussed. I think another huge priority for the city, most other cities around the state have gone this way a number of years ago. It will make our streets, sidewalks, catch basins a lot cleaner. We're literally sweeping, Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, until July.
Yeah.
Every year, there's an amazing amount of sand being dumped on our roads. You see by March or April what this place looks like. We can do something about that, and we can join many other communities across the state, across the country that have gone this way a while ago.
Yeah, and the equipment that we use to clean the streets, when we have a lot of sand, those sweepers that you see out, they're also very specialized and very expensive to maintain. New, I think they go between $350,000 and $400,000 new. We actually had one in the Capitol. I don't believe it's being funded, but one of the sweepers that we have right now is coming to its age. So yeah, very expensive parts. It takes us, with 2 sweepers out, it takes us 8 or 10 weeks to get everything swept up. And obviously that's a lot of labor and a lot of man time where we could be doing other things. Yeah.
I had a quick question about, the 175% increase.
Mike on, Counselor?
Pardon? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
The 175% increase in road maintenance, I've been around the city quite a bit lately, and I think it needs it, but why had it been so low? Why are we playing catch-up at this point? How come this wasn't, you had a pile of money from the feds and whatever, and nothing was ever done with roads?
Well, it hasn't been a priority,
They're fair questions
unfortunately.
to ask.
Yeah, they are, yeah. It just hasn't been a priority from former administrations, is to really pour money into the roads. And
So at 80,000, presumably that number has been lower and lower. If I were to go back further than these years?
that's right. It has been lowered. It was up around the $200,000 per year, annual paving.
And what would this do? Where would it get us?
Like Brian said, it would get us more. We would be able to highlight, the streets and the areas that are in especially rough shape, would be able to repair them so they would hold up for, I don't know, about 7 years, about 3 to 5 years.
Well, I guess what I mean is, like, percentage-wise, does that get us at 100%?
No.
Does that get us at 50? What is it?
We have an unbelievable amount of deferred maintenance on roads. So, I mean, this is a small step. But, so for example, we'll talk about paving later on. But, I mean, we're talking about paving, 5 streets, maybe not even full sections, and that's a couple $1 million. So it's very expensive.
So you're saying that at 175% increase,
Yeah.
we're going to get to,
You're going to get a few residential
10%?
side streets with a skinny coat on it.
no, I understand that, but I guess I'm trying to figure out, if we're buying a project done, okay, if we were to fund the whole thing, the way the city needs to be done, I mean, maybe the way it should be, it would cost X amount. So I guess what I'm asking is,
Yeah.
what does this increase get us of that 100%?
A very small bite at the apple.
What's small? 2%?
No, it's probably,
20%?
to be honest with you, it's probably like a 0.5%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. We'd need something like, if we were to do all of the roads and all of the
Yeah.
sidewalks, we'd
That need to be
probably-
done. I don't mean all of them, but the ones
Yeah.
that need to be
They
done.
almost all
at
need
this
to be
point.
done. Yeah.
And that have been identified as needing to be done?
Yeah, we had a survey done, we've got a report, so we do know the streets that need to be done.
You guys did that, or was that done?
We engineered.
Wright
Wright
Pierce,
Right.
No, and I mean, but I mean, this, earlier you talked about the previous administration, so I guess what I'm saying is, this administration
Previous.
did this? The previous administration did this? And they didn't do
Previous,
anything,
previous.
they didn't do anything about it?
We have had, I will say, the roads have been underfunded here for many years.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't get to this problem by just a couple of years
Well,
being
it's gonna continue,
off.
I guess, even at
This
this rate.
has been off for quite a while.
That's just a huge increase.
Yeah, it will take millions and millions and millions of dollars to get us up to where we should be.
And none of this money is matched by state or feds or anything? It's all on us, huh?
No,
Oh,
Good
that's state aid roads, I mean, there's no,
Do we borrow for this? Do we bond for this?
well, we are.
we're going to talk about that, yeah.
Okay.
We'll need to bond.
Right.
I don't mean to
And,
consume.
no, I just wanted to,
This number just jumped out at me.
yeah, no, it's a really good point. I just wanted to point out, we did bond, we had a sizable bond a couple of years ago for roads and sidewalks, and that we were hit with a sharp increase in materials and labor, right? But we are bonding also for roads this year. So I guess my question here is, why what was the idea behind putting this in the budget as opposed to in the bond?
So this is in addition to, so if we
Right.
bond, say, $2 million for roads this year, we also need money, that's only going to cover 4 or 5 streets. There are a number of low-traffic side streets that could strongly benefit from just, we'll call it a skinny coat or a shim coat or whatever you want to call it, that will get us 5 or 7 years and provide a lot of relief to, I think, a lot of residents on these smaller, low-traffic side streets. So that's
Yeah.
where this line is, and then striping is also in here,
That's
correct, Matt?
right.
So line striping is also included here.
I guess my question is, why, is the idea that you could do this immediately in the summer and not wait until a bond?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Councilor McCormick?
My ward was the recipient of the last bond for paving, and I'm gonna side with them on this one for a little bit because I was standing there watching it going on. And hot top, from the time we passed on the bond to the next spring when they started work, hot tops doubled. Okay? And then you get into these streets that they don't know what's down there, and if they have to tear into one to redo it like they did Kerry Lane, a couple others, they run into unexpected surprises on top of that. So, yeah, 175, this is one of the few things I can understand that. I'm happy to see that we made some money with the purple bags. I'm a major proponent for them. It's a user fee. The more you use them, the more it's going to cost you. But this is something that, yes, we don't do enough for our roads, and I got a couple of roads in my neighborhood that I would like to see done that I'm sure are going to get passed over for more important roads. But this is one of the few that, given the age of the city, given the age of the roads, and the lack of care, if they decide they got to tear up, say, they got to tear up Elm Street, take it down to gravel, they don't know what they're going to run into when they get down there. I mean, yeah, they
Yeah.
do, because it's one of the better surveyed streets, but you're going to run into surprises with some of this stuff.
Okay, Counselor Kleebach and then Counselor Gagnon.
Yeah, I'll just echo what the city manager is saying. We are coming to terms today with it. We're dealing with the bitter fruits of bad policy from 4 mayoral administrations back, right? Where there was an austerity imposed on the city, and things like roads were left to languish. At some point, somebody is going to have to come to terms with that, right? And there were other things, there were other parts of city government that were slashed at that point in time as well. And we've been slowly trying to rectify the HR side of those deficits in the city. And we've done a great job of that, I think, in the last 4 years. We have an assistant city manager. That's an excellent improvement. But infrastructure is another part of the city budget that has languished from the time of those cuts that happened, over a decade ago. And we're just going to, at some point, the city's going to have to, come to terms with that, and hopefully learn that lesson, that if you want a functional municipality, you want decent streets, et cetera, if you want services that come along with living in a city that, what I would like to hope is the stature of Waterville, then it requires a certain amount of annual commitment to that.
It's also a fair point I'll just mention, if I could real quickly. The longer you sort of let these problems go, it costs a lot more to rebuild a road.
It's
Than
exponential,
to do
yeah.
some more minor maintenance on it, correct, Matt?
100%. Yeah, our engineer always says it's pretty simple, but keep your good roads,
Yeah.
roads good as long as you can, because a
Right.
lot of our roads are calling for complete reclaims, which is 6 or 8 times more than just doing a 1.5 inch or half inch surface on top.
And we have a number now in this category.
Yeah.
I believe one's in my neighborhood.
Yes.
Thank you. Did you have a follow-up, Ken?
On these roads that are going to be improved on this line item, do you have a list of those streets?
We haven't identified them.
How do you know how much it's going to be then?
Again,
You're
this
just
is,
punting with a number?
well, it's just something more than what's typically been there. So I'd like to, it shouldn't just be up to me, it should be up to a group of us that are making decisions with that extra money. So, yeah, we don't have a list right now.
And this is, again, this is not for road paving. This is for what we'll call maintenance. And so we need more maintenance in the budget to maintain roads. So that's where the number comes from. Is this enough? No, it's not. It's not nearly enough. This is a drop in the bucket.
Yeah,
So that's the, what we're trying to present.
yeah, I understand that. And there's a lot of priorities for the city, and, I've got a lot of lectures on what needs there are for the city and the state over the years. And, budgets are choices, right? And we have to figure out if we want to do all of this stuff or, and raise taxes to do that. Or we should, hold departments tight and not raise taxes, right? Or find it in some other way. I'm not going to support a tax increase, personally. And because, we have one of the highest tax cities, we have the third or something in the state. And our roads aren't that great. And I'm sure the airport needs things and you need new positions. But we're going to have to get to the point where, we're going to ask for priorities. If you have to figure out, for example, we just talked about a position versus this road work, which is a higher priority.
I'm sorry, are you asking which is?
Yeah, just
higher?
between those two things. Which do you think is a higher priority? The position
Yeah.
that you're proposing, additional position, or this money, additional money for the roads?
It's a tough one.
Yeah, that's why we're
But you're the
here.
professional.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I would say, I mean, well, if you're gonna put me right on the spot, I would say the position.
Okay.
Yeah, it's more urgent. But,
Really?
I mean, they're
I mean,
pretty
they
close.
kind of tie in
They're
together,
pretty
too.
close.
It's not, you know,
So roads being done more quickly, plowed more quickly is a higher priority than bad roads. It's okay. I understand that. I accept your answer, but I'm just,
Can we talk about the salt and sand line for a minute? Because that's a pretty hefty number, too.
yes. So as I said, this goes with the SALT priority initiative. So Matt, do you want to just explain?
Yeah, it's a little more
Cost
costly upfront. Yeah,
Okay.
'cause The cost of salt is more costly upfront, so that would explain the difference there. But it doesn't, you know, what's not accounted for in this line is the 2 months of hauling that we
Yeah.
do with 8 or 10 trucks and the fuel and the labor it takes. So it's pretty much a wash, although it doesn't indicate it on that line from 210 to 300. Just, it would be seen in other places, like our motor fuels line.
And then sweeping.
Yeah, in our
I
sweeping
mean, we
lines.
spend until July or August sweeping every year.
Was that factored in this budget as far as a reduction in expenses elsewhere? Or will
What you're
we,
Yeah.
Will we
What
see
you're gonna
that?
find there is that the crew, instead of hauling the sand, is gonna be doing more work, more maintenance work. Instead of taking those however many weeks it takes for them to haul sand back and forth from the pits. So it's an indirect savings, it's a more of an efficient use of their labor and the truck's cost to do actual work in the city instead of hauling sand back and forth.
yeah, I get that, but I think the answer is no. Right? So it's not
You
like you
can't
reduced
quantify.
other lines, it's just that you're going to see more efficiency. Yeah, okay. And just one more question on this. Is there any change in materials used? Because I know there was some discussion of that at one point.
Well, it's salt that we pre-wet with brine, a salt brine, if that's what you're, so that's what and we'd like to completely eliminate the use of sand.
Okay,
Unless, you know, there are hills and there are certain areas where we would throw it down in under certain conditions, but by all, you know, accounts, we would like to eliminate sand.
And Matt, we've been speaking with, and we'll, you know, get guidance from other communities who've been doing this for a while. For example, I know you brought up some of the impacts of salt. And, you know, we will be, I think, working closely with some of our colleagues out there, excuse me, to understand all the implications and how best to manage this. But as I said, many communities across the state, Portland, all the major cities have been doing this for quite a while. And so we will learn from their experiences and best practices. And you've already been to Lewiston, I believe,
Yeah,
to
Lewiston,
discuss
and we
with their
went,
crews.
yeah, with MDOT as well, so we're
right.
very confident that people are gonna be very
And the
pleased
state,
with the
right.
program, yeah.
okay, thank you.
Okay, moving.
Anyone else? Okay.
Moving on to page 66, traffic management, you see a $25,000 decrease in miscellaneous supplies. Now this, Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, MDOT is picking up some of these responsibilities?
Yeah, for
which is leading
traffic
to decrease?
signals, right, yeah. Kind of a little change in process where they're taking over any issues around maintenance in the cabinets. And we have a lot of cabinets around, we've all seen them, right? Oftentimes they're tagged, so we try to get those cleaned up, but, right, they are taking over maintenance of the cabinets, which will be should be a big savings for us. Our engineers met with their lead people last week, and so yeah, that's a nice reduction in that line.
All right. Matt, anything else on Public Works you'd like to say or highlight or anything else to add?
No, I think that bouncing back,
okay.
you know, kind of get everything out.
Okay. Questions?
What's the actual percent increase from? Microphone, please. What's the actual percent increase from, that's the first page, from last year's budget to this year's budget?
The net increase is 7.4% total.
In this budget?
Yes. Dollar amount is about 260,000.
Thank you.
All right,
Okay,
move-
anyone else before we move on? Okay.
Pine Grove Cemetery. No major changes here. As you know, this is largely funded with perpetual care funds, trust funds. There was, you'll see under labor costs, some changes there. Roland's salary was split out from those of the part-time maintenance wages. Is that correct, guys? So that's why you see those numbers there, 76.9, for example, decreased line 26. There's not really any other major changes to really highlight here. There's a slight decrease in the equipment line. Matt, anything else on cemeteries?
No, like Brian said, most of the funding does come from the perpetual care fund. It's a beautiful cemetery, very old. We've had a very difficult time over the last, I'm gonna say, 4 to 6 years finding staff to help us there. I mean, that's the reality that we run into every year. So we're moving our parks crew over in the spring, late spring, early summer. It's just, we're super busy everywhere. So at times we get behind. And we're running out of space for traditional burials. I think the last time I spoke with Roland, there may be less than 20% of actual land left for traditional burials. But of course, the urns and the cremations take up much less space, so there's plenty of more room for those.
But hurry up and buy your plot.
Yeah. Right. Sales pitch.
All right, cemeteries? Anything else? Okay, we'll move on to Parks and Rec. So the one change you'll see here, you see it reflected under net administration costs. There's a $25,000 decrease. So there is a $25,000 decrease in line 72, which is the brown tail moth mitigation. We've, I think, discussed and are comfortable with reducing that down to 25 for this year. I think Councilor Klepak's also been looped in on this. I know this is a particular concern.
Yeah, I would simply say that that expense on behalf of the city should be responsive to need. So, yeah, I think we all can see that Waterville is pretty clear right now, and that is due to a couple things: fortuitous weather, and the Parks and Public Works Department really doing an excellent job on helping mitigation over the last couple of years. So yeah, I think keeping it down to 25 is great. I think it's a great idea, but that's with the caveat that this is not a problem that's going away. It will be something that the city will likely have to deal with in the future. And I will also say that I know the Public Works Department and I myself and other people are working very hard to come up with strategies for dealing with it in the future that will be lower expense than what we've had to deal with in the past. That's the goal here, is like the most cost-effective way of dealing with the problem in the future. But yeah, 25 is great. I hope to not even have to use all that next year, actually.
All right, we're going to jump down to Croy Road. So page 77 begins on line 159. So we had some decent growth in some of the revenues at Croy Road. You see driving some numbers here.
Where was that revenue from specifically?
So it's detailed line by line here. So top of page 78, first half, goes through the revenue changes. Matt, any particular?
Yeah, those lines, we're very happy with the revenue lines. Season passes, over 53,000, ski club, almost 23,000. So, yep, day passes, event venue, we're pleased with the uptick in revenues there.
And to events, the Quarry Road event. So we made roughly 30K in 2023, and then that was cut by half by 2024. Is that because that was the year we had the Bill Koch?
Yep, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
I think we may have had 2 Eastern Cups, so it does totally depend on
Yeah, man.
the bidding and who.
Let's
gets
get
the
that
races.
back.
I'm sorry?
I want that back.
Yeah.
I want the Bill Koch back.
So under Quarry Road operating cost, page 79, you do see some minor additions here and there throughout some lines. Not anything particular on these. Again, we're talking about vehicle equipment and maintenance, costs are going up. Facility maintenance, a lot of these are just dealing with inflationary pressures that we're all facing.
Yeah.
Moving on to page 80, the line to highlight here is line 256, the last line, recreation program subsidy. So we have built in another $20,000 for subsidy to lower the cost of recreation programs for Waterville kids. Matt brought this initiative up, and more to say on that?
Yeah, it's very similar to what we've been doing over the last couple of years at the outdoor pool, where for season passes and for individual passes. We base it on $40 per individual voucher. So what we'd like to support, because we're no longer running youth recreation programs, is we want to support those programs at the Alphon Youth Center. We've worked with Patrick Garrett, the chief operating officer there, and, we did historical numbers. And we think that a budget of, was it $20,000 would go a long way in subsidizing rec basketball, field hockey, baseball, softball, cheering, football, spring soccer, fall soccer, and track for a lot of
Yeah.
Waterville kids.
I'm just going to say this right now because I know this is not going to happen now, but this particular point that you're making touches upon something that I've, in my imagination, envisioned and hoped for. The Youth Arts Access Fund here in Waterville is such an amazing program. It makes me so proud to live in Waterville, and I would be over the moon to be able to have a youth recreation access fund similar to that, where any youth could somehow access that fund to be able to participate in, a range of different recreational, outdoor and healthy living type activities in the town. It's an aspiration. I don't know where that is on the horizon, but if it's possible someday, I would love to see something like that happen. Building upon this kind of subsidy idea.
Oh, go ahead.
I understood that the money for, the city pays Alphon
AYCC.
money. Is that in here?
Yes, so that's one of the sort of third-party budget lines that we have, so AYCC, KV Cap, Waterville Creek.
Oh, so it's not in this
LRC.
budget?
It is, it's not in this section.
That's what I meant, that's what I meant.
Yeah, yes,
It's in
It's not,
administration.
it's under
It's in
administration.
I see, okay.
So I want to say something about the comparison with the Youth Arts Access Fund, which is that those funds are provided by Waterville Creates to the community. And I definitely like the direction we're going. I think we should have a reduction for Waterville youth. But aren't we kind of just subsidizing the AYCC by providing this? Can we work, can they help us, can they help raise money so that we taxpayers don't have to pay for this line item? Have we talked to them about that? Because
Not
it
directly, no,
doesn't
we haven't directly
exactly
talked to them about
seem, and you mentioned the pool. I mean, we share revenue with them for the pool, correct? So that also, but we don't share any revenue with other programs that are partly supported by the city, such as baseball, softball, things that are on city
I think we're more than
facilities.
happy to discuss with the AYCC. I think the goal is to reduce the barrier for, obviously, kids getting involved in
Absolutely.
recreation. And, whether we do that through this route or we talk to AYCC, I think we're willing to have that conversation. But I think the goal remains the same.
Absolutely. That's something I'd like to work towards, for sure. Yeah. Anyone else?
Anything else on Parks and Rec? Okay, I think we'll move on to capital.
I did have one more question, but it's probably related to the current one. I was at a meeting where you discussed the, I want to say Sterling Street. Is that where that little park is?
Yep.
What do they call that? Tot
Sometimes a pocket park or tot lot.
lot, that's what I saw.
Yeah.
And that's going to be done this year?
Correct.
Okay, I have some questions about it for you.
Yep.
That's my board.
I have another question as well, actually. Jeff Tucker's position is not in this budget, is it?
Yeah, it is.
Oh, it is. What line is that?
Let me go back.
It's in quarry under full-time wages and
Yep.
salaries.
Yep.
Okay.
Line 184, yeah.
Oh, that's it. Gotcha.
And then there are associated benefits, of course, below that.
I have another question, too, about, what line is it? Once 171 is a revenue line, Quarry Road Program Director reimbursement, or is
Yes.
that what that is? Okay.
Yeah.
So that
This is the-
offsets.
This is the last year of that, I believe, correct? Matt?
No, there's one more.
One more?
There's one more.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
So that's offsetting Jeff Tucker's position?
Yes.
Correct.
Right, okay,
yeah.
thank you.
And next year will be one more year of that after that, and then next year, the year following, we will have to see an increase in our budget for that.
We will. We should expect, they have roughly, we didn't do it, we did it year by year, but it's based on, what programs Jeff's running to offset expenses.
Yeah.
okay? So we expect that next year, or next year, we'll be getting roughly $16,000 once more.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that will be it for the grant.
Can you talk for just a moment about any other potential staffing needs out there to be able to help Jeff be more effective at his job? I know he spends time doing things that aren't exactly program direction.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot.
Yeah.
There's a lot that he could use out there. We've identified a few grants to help with assistant coaching for next season. So we've made some movement there, but in terms of maintenance, it's just our parks crew getting to things when we can get to them when we're not busy somewhere else.
What would the ideal be?
To have a full-time facilities person would be very helpful for Jeff, I'm sure. Yep. That's just dedicated to Quarry Road year-round.
Making sure the piston bully is working or the
Yeah,
like.
someone that with mechanical inclination, but landscape, all that type of work.
Yeah,
right?
because he's doing all that as
He's
well as
doing all
program
that.
direction right
Right,
now.
yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Welcome.
So the net cost of Quarry Road is 40,000 approximately? Is that,
35, I
right?
think.
yeah,
Yeah.
okay,
Yep. Yep,
Good
close,
deal.
Close, yep.
yeah.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Where do we see there's revenue that comes from the solar park, or whatever it's called, on airport property?
I'm not familiar with.
It's in the airport budget.
It is? As revenue?
Yes.
Please, okay.
Okay, last chance for Parks and Rec questions for tonight.
All right, capital. So what you have contained here is a 2-year capital improvement plan. Capital improvement planning is another area in the past the city maybe hasn't always kept up. It's extremely important that we have a capital plan to maintain what we have. There are a lot of costs, they never end. So there's a couple of things I want to discuss here. Number one, you'll see with funding method, a variety of different ways to fund these projects. One of those funding methods involves a bond. So at our May 7th meeting, we're going to have a discussion about a bond for this year. We are forecasting the need for a bond in the range of $6.5 million. There are a variety of other sources in here for funds. Another one you'll see, it's called interest or capital reserve funding. So really due to Christina's work, we've seen a good bump in our interest earnings. That said, I think we have talked a little bit with this council before about capital reserve accounts or reserve accounts. Would like to present the idea of taking some of those interest earnings and dedicating them to a capital reserve account to be used for capital projects throughout the year to be approved by this council as the agents to expend, to keep up with many of these needs and projects that we have. For example, I'll just throw out, in the last couple of days, we've been notified by the library that they need approximately $150,000 of HVAC work in order to cool the library this summer. $150,000 is not something we in the city of Waterville have kicking around in our budget, just in little pots of gold somewhere. We need to do a better job of planning for these sorts of things that happen. They come up, we have a $150,000 bill, it's gotta be done. Your really only choices are to dip into fund balance at this point, general fund, or we set up some sort of reserve account or a savings account to fund these projects. We have no other real way of doing this. So we're going to put that out there as an idea. If we don't do that, you can obviously still go to general fund, fund balance to fund some of these things. It's not generally a great practice to keep dipping into that. Times change. We have a very healthy fund balance right now, as you heard from the auditor last time, but that doesn't mean that will always be the case. And we have a 12% threshold to meet there. So we would like to talk about a capital reserve account at some point. This library expense that's fallen down, really in the last few days, is a prime example of why it's good to plan for these things. So that's another point of discussion here, but you see interest or capital reserve funding in the first chunk of these projects. The rest you see, there are some grant funds in here. There are some CDS's congressionally directed spending. It's the new earmarks, if you will, of that process, where many communities have been very successful in getting some major funds out of the federal government for projects, particularly public safety buildings, wastewater facilities, other municipal infrastructure around the state. So you see that, and then you also see a small amount of solar reserve funding being used for a planning and design project. So I don't think we need to go through this line by line, but I will say this was developed in consultation with all the department heads, talking about all the capital needs across the city. There are many. The costs on many of them are big. And the point is that we need to start planning to meet these obligations. And we will, as I said, on May 7th, be entertaining the discussion of a bond to fund not just road projects this year in the neighborhood of about $2 million, but the many other priorities you see through here, many of them infrastructure, that are before us. So particular questions or things you want to pull out to discuss. You also see some TIF funding in here too, and we'll talk more about that in a moment. And Christina, Bill, jump in, anything else you want to add on capital?
What would you suggest is the correct total for a capital reserve fund?
Do you have a old policy? We haven't found anything that rescinded it yet, that showed that, that you'd maintain at least $200,000 in the capital for emergencies. I know that sometimes people will look at fund balance and say, well, we can just take it out of there. But good financial planning, that doesn't really make a lot of sense when emergencies come up during the year. You are much better to utilize that toward offset of your tax increases and things that are stabilized. Whereas I believe that if you set aside some funding for capital or emergency funds, it doesn't impact negatively, because you don't want those to hit on a year that you've utilized all your excess to reduce taxes, because what it does ultimately is it causes your budget and your mill rate to spike up and down, and have more of an impact, the same as the deferred maintenance, basically, putting it off. You know that there are some things that you're gonna have to do. Facility improvements, replacement of furnaces, some roof repairs, some of those things that, failure to do them will cost you more in the long run, or as you indicated earlier, increase from one year to the next year. So I'm a strong believer into make a financial plan that makes sense. So to me, when I did the memo on the recommendation to use the increased interest, we've been very lucky this past year with the interest rates being higher and being able to renegotiate what we received. It was not money that you budgeted on. It did not impact. By making that proposal, it's just taking what has come in. That's not affecting anything with what the auditor told you, because the auditor based his on the close of June 30th of last year. And you had a healthy fund at that point. So I looked at it as additional revenue and the opportunity to buy some much needed equipment, big priced equipment, and that would keep it out of the bond and allow you to buy it with cash that you did not expect to have. And I think putting a reasonable amount in there of what you expect for revenue, but utilizing that if you can to fund capital projects, gives you much more stability in addressing some of those things that could come up during the year, and having something to fall back on that does not impact your tax rate at the end of the year when you look at fund balance. So that happens to be the reason I recommended it in the manner in which I did as your finance director, so.
Just to add on to what Christina and Brian have said, we're in a fortunate position that Christina was able to increase our interest rates this fiscal year. So in the memo that's in your binders, that's behind those spreadsheets of the capital plan, her description of items that could be funded with the extra revenue is about $422,000. And we're gonna have approximately $455,000 above what was budgeted for that interest income for this fiscal year. So that's, I hate to use the term found money, but it allows this council and the city to fund those projects without having to pay any interest on borrowing for those items. And we can get them done, quickly, hopefully.
This year.
This year, yes. And some of those items are, again, as Brian said before, it's deferred maintenance, painting City Hall trim, doing repointing on City Hall. We need to take care of that infrastructure in those buildings to make sure that we don't have major problems down the road. I've been here for a little bit more than 2 years as the assistant manager, and I'm amazed with the amount of work that has to be done. It's scary, actually, when I look at this. And then not having any capital reserve funds to speak of that have been money set aside to deal with these things as they come up, it really hampers the city. So we'd love to see that created. Otherwise, you're going to be dipping into your unassigned fund balance, which is fine, it's healthy, but it's really not the way to plan for the future and to have that stable tax rate, as Christina has said.
I will second that. Just a real eye-opener incoming here. The amount of need, the amount of deferred maintenance, and the lack of funds, or dedicated funds, or funds in reserve accounts to do that, is pretty unbelievable. So we do have to play a bit of catch-up here, and to get these things done.
That list, Brian, is there a list? I mean, do we know how much money is a deferred maintenance citywide?
Yeah, I think, when you look at this list of projects here, a lot of this is deferred.
No, I'm just asking, is there a specific group that has put together a list of deferred maintenance? So we know what that money,
Yeah, I think we could break this out further, but I think when you look through most of this list, a lot of it is deferred. So take the first, chunk here, City Hall painting, City Hall masonry and repointing.
no, I understand, hold on. That's not what I'm asking.
Got
There's probably more than what's in this budget, right? I mean, we just talked about roads. So all of the roads that need to be done in the city are not in this budget, correct?
Correct.
But they're all deferred maintenance.
yes.
Okay. And so do we know what that total amount is for the city? I mean, you said
I don't think we do.
you didn't realize, that you needed a cooling system for the library and, I mean,
That
someone
just
goes.
came- that just came up.
I came from an institution where there's really no deferred maintenance. They
Yeah.
pay for it as they go. And the reason why you can do it like that is if you know what you've got to attack. If you just shoot money at something, from a source that wasn't anticipated, that's not really a plan. Okay,
So- Sorry.
So I'd almost encourage you to maybe put together a group that would, to look at deferred maintenance of the city. That's what I keep hearing, there's need here, there's need here,
We
there's need
can
here,
do
there's
that.
deferred maintenance. But, but it'd be nice to see a list of what this deferred maintenance, and then maybe it can be prioritized, organized, do some capital planning for that. That was my first point. The second is I can't remember what my second one is. Will there be a separate order for the excess money from the, we should call it the rainy day fund, is that what we're talking about?
No.
The reserves for the city.
No,
It helps with rates and stuff like that, right?
this is revenue right now. This is excess revenue that.
No, I'm not talking about that amount, I'm talking about the whole bunch of money. How much is in
The
reserves?
fund balance.
Yeah.
The undesignated fund balance.
Yes.
Correct.
Right.
We're at 20%, and you can utilize up to, the policy is to leave 12%. So I believe it was 3,700,000.
Sounds about, I'd say about 3.5.
If you spend it down, if this is what I think it is, if you spend it down to zero, then it hurts in bonding and stuff like that, right? Hurts
Oh,
our
yes.
rate. So there's a certain amount that the bonding companies want to see, correct? In there.
Yes.
Okay. Is there going to be a separate order then for us to talk about when it comes to this money?
For bond?
No, for this excess
That's
money.
in here.
It's part of the budget, it's not a separate
It's part of the
fund?
budget. It's your total of how much you want to apply to stabilize the tax rate and reduce this budget, the impact. And last year you utilized
2
million and 85, I think. And the proposal this year is 2.5 mil.
Correct.
But you're,
Well, so just to be clear,
You're on fund
we
balance.
assigned 2.8 in our budget from the unassigned fund balance, which we didn't actually need. So it went back into, but this year we have I don't remember. 2.5, okay, right.
I'm getting, I guess I'm just trying to get to the point of that amount of money, that whatever excess, try to figure out where it's spent. And you're proposing that it would be put in the capital budget?
No. I'm saying you have extra revenue that you're earning while the interest rates
I understand
are
that.
up.
I understand
We
that.
don't know what they're gonna do next year or the following year. I'm saying if you can utilize that and take some of these things off the list that you know you need to get done without impacting your fund balance that you have to put toward reducing the
Right.
budget.
Or
that-
bonding.
Why not do that? Because you can't guarantee that revenue going forward each and every year. If you bank on it to reduce your taxes and you don't receive it, then you've got a
I
significant, you
understand
can
that.
have a
Hold the film.
significant tax increase. Whereas if you just put it in capital, it still has to come before you to approve spending it for something that comes up during the year.
That was my question.
Yeah.
So that would be a separate order, that we're going to use this money to fund this.
That's right.
And it's
And the
not,
council would decide again.
we don't
all
just vote on a
expenses.
budget and then it's done. There's going to be separate.
I mean, rates are going to come down after November.
Yeah.
So we're not going to.
No, I'm just trying to understand the process in this, so, thank you.
I just wanted to comment on your first comment about the capital plan. So what you see in front of you is 2 years' worth, because we were focusing on that bond. There are future years column, which has identified some other projects. So we do have a 5-year plan that we've been working on and putting together. So to your point, to look at all of our projects at once, the goal really is to get the 5-year plan done and then put a 10-year plan together so we can look at all of that in a big picture.
But that's not deferred maintenance specifically, right? That's capital.
Well, it's both. It's
I know,
both.
But I'm interested in deferred.
Yeah.
I mean, we can probably narrow it down, so just,
Yeah,
I mean, we
yeah.
can do that.
Yeah, we certainly could.
That's still in review to put group together.
Okay.
So just going back to the idea of a capital fund, a capital reserve account, it does seem like a good idea and important if we're going to go forward with this capital plan to know where we're taking the funds from. But obviously, interest rates will vary year to year. So we're not talking about taking, funding it with interest revenue, correct? I mean,
We're talking about funding it with, at
this
point.
year it works, but
Next year, what was not projected as a revenue to make the budget, anything earned above and beyond that would then be moved out to capital. If you don't earn it, you can't move anything into the capital.
okay, but doesn't that kind of go against the idea of needing to have a fund to chip away at capital items? I mean, they're going to happen.
I think
whether
something
you-
is better than nothing, is kind of the view
Okay.
maybe. I mean, whatever it is, that over and above is, it goes to this capital account. This past year, it's been pretty good. Maybe future years, it's not as good.
Okay.
But the general point is, and you pulled out that capital reserve policy, we should have something to work with on capital projects that come up. And, and building maintenance needs, whatever it is, they happen. Sometimes they happen without warning, and we need to pay for it.
Are you suggesting, Councilor Green, an annual contribution on top of whatever, discovered revenue?
Yes, I am, because I think, I understand the idea that if we have excess revenue, then we should put it to capital, but we won't always have that, and we're going to have the needs. So I guess I am advocating for maybe, I don't understand why we would just put interest into that account.
Can we have them comment on that? And what would be the magnitude, the scale of that kind of contribution that would be responsible but still effective?
I think we have to do what the gentleman up here, Mr. Gagnon, suggested and break those out, the difference between the capital and the deferred maintenance, to really get an understanding of, like the library, we don't know necessarily that was going to come up immediately. There's other situations, but some of them we certainly can come up with a more detailed plan of those expenses over time and what an average annual amount might be reasonable. And to your question on the deferred, I know the big ticket, a lot of the big ticket expenses, they've had a lot of road work done and a lot of side work, walk work done by the engineers. So I think Matt has some more hard numbers for those really big costs. As Bill said, it's those things that come up like the painting, the repointing, the fixing of the steps, granite steps at City Hall out front where they've shifted a little bit. Some of those things that, okay, we can get by another year and then all of a sudden, no, it's dangerous. We need to address this, or leaking roof. So I think maybe breaking
Yeah.
those out a little more defined in the plan would help everybody.
I think the major point is those unforeseen expenses. For example, library HVAC, $150,000, we have to cool the library this summer. We couldn't have planned for it, I guess, in total. You can obviously foresee some, end-of-life things with equipment, but sometimes things just happen and they need to be replaced. And that's where a capital reserve account like this will be particularly helpful, is allowing us to meet those obligations as they come up.
Well, presumably, and first of all, I want to say this is a great start. and important to do if we're ever going to catch up. And right now, we've got a mix of deferred maintenance and things we know we're going to have to replace in this capital plan. So one would hope that eventually we would be just looking at, expected replacements, and of course, things do come up. I guess I'm wondering, with the capital reserve account, is the idea that this would just be for unforeseen costs as opposed to capital expenses needed?
Just unforeseen, but for example, as we said, those items that are small enough that can be absorbed there where we don't have to bond and
Right.
pay interest on would seem like smart financial planning. So, you can look at this list, the City Hall masonry, for example, can easily be covered with a capital reserve account, funds. Or, $2 million in paving, that's not going to be, that's not going to be coming from this. That's going to be a bond item for the city. But the smaller maintenance needs or unforeseen needs, absolutely.
So then, is it fair to say that all of the items listed under the cap reserve fund are deferred maintenance, or are they just things that you
Many of
wanna
them are
take care
deferred
of?
maintenance. I mean, looking at this list, I don't think you can say every single one is necessarily deferred maintenance. I mean, the customer service, counter, should we have kept up more maybe, but it's not, but the painting, the masonry, the backflow preventer, carpet replacement, I mean, these are all things that just haven't been done in quite a while.
Right, but then on the other page, there's a utility truck replacement and
That's just end of life, yeah.
and that's, sorry?
Just end of life for that vehicle, that piece of equipment.
Okay, yeah, all right, thank you.
It's actually that one in particular is out of service currently because it's not inspectable.
Due to rust issues.
Yeah, it's gotten to the point where we can't drive it anymore, so.
Yeah,
main
I
vehicle.
think what I'm looking for is just like a bit of more of an overview on, the philosophy of how you're funding what with what, right? The bond versus the capital reserve account versus other reserve accounts, and, yeah. But,
I mean, I think that is the philosophy. Let's not borrow if we don't have to. That's part of it. So if we can cover a number of these items with a capital reserve account off of, over and above interest income that we've received, that would seem smart to do rather than bond and pay on that. So again, it's those smaller items that may be able to be covered in this account. And again, also having just a place where when, things go wrong, we can go to fund these projects rather than dipping into fund balance all the time.
Can I just add
Okay.
something to that, too? Some of these reserve funds are self-generating. So we have an older police car that's really not good for patrolling anymore. But when we put it out to sale, we'll generate some money, but not enough. We don't want to lose that. The idea behind that fund was to set it aside in a special fund, so it will be applied to the purchase of another
Right.
vehicle in the future. And so you have a little bit of those. We do get a little bit of money for capital once in a while. That, like when we did the furnace project at City Hall, because it was going more energy efficiency to natural gas, we did send in the paperwork and we did get a $12,000 or $14,000 check back for that investment, which then went into City Hall and was used to address some of the office and improvements downstairs when HR moved over from Public Works. So we did have a little bit of money there for that came from the efficiency main check. If there is a bond for a project, specific project, that we do not utilize all of it because we save on costs. I believe a typical one for this was the recycling truck. They put in 300,000, it came in around 284. It created a $16,000 difference. We moved that to public work equipment, and that would be applied for a necessary piece of equipment, or before we put it back in a budget for more money, we would look at those accounts. That right now is the only way that any money is being generated for capital for the city. So I just wanted to add that.
Any other questions?
Yeah, you gave a very sort of thorough answer. Thank you for your, but I was also just kind of thinking it much more simply, and so I would beg you to speak to me at my level here. What would a reasonable contribution, annual contribution to that fund, if we were to put, if we were trying to capitalize that fund with an annual contribution on top of like these discovered revenue, what would you suggest would be a total that would, an annual amount that would make sense? Or am I not thinking of it correctly?
No, I think you're thinking of it correctly, but I think to give you a more complete and accurate
Yeah.
answer, we would need to break those accounts apart.
Yeah.
And take a look at what is on the list and what we know that is upcoming in the future. And then divide that by 5 years, 10 years, or whatever, to come up with a fair amount
Yeah.
that would suit capital needs, so.
And that would be outside of the deferred maintenance costs on top of it that we're trying to catch up on. Gotcha.
We do have that policy. What would you say, 200,000, or what was that number?
It's, yes, there's a policy for 200,000, as you can see.
From where was that?
2005 it was adopted.
Add an inflationary index to that, and you're probably looking at.
Yeah, at least,
double.
yeah.
Plus the cost
20
of
years
doing
ago.
business has just jumped because of the pandemic, obviously. But
I wouldn't be surprised to see it at $450,000 to $500,000
Yeah.
for those capital costs, to keep it out. But if you're keeping it, as was said here, if you're keeping it out of the bond and you're not paying interest on it in the future, it is very well maybe more cost-effective. Sometimes when you delay the bonds and you have the interest, plus you have the additional costs of inflation impacts and rising in just cost of everything.
So then with, if you think about trying to capitalize that account to that amount over 10 years, and then with the bonus of any discovered revenue and the deficit of any, withdrawals on that account, and considering inflation, maybe like $75K a year, something like that, over a decade is what we're talking about. Is that right? To get to that number, maybe?
Yeah, maybe.
I mean, there's a lot of like ifs and
Moving
ands,
pieces, yeah.
buts there, but.
Yeah, and I think that when you have an account like that, if you don't utilize, maybe one year you only utilize 125,000, that allows you to then just put back the 125 and bring it whole.
Yeah.
So we just wanted to put this on the radar. I think it is really important as we look at, all the needs that we have here, and how do we start chipping away at this and be prepared for those expenses that come up that we weren't necessarily prepared for. Anything else on capital before we move on to the last piece, which is TIF? Okay. So page 92 in your binders. So this is just a general layout of, this is all of our TIF districts, all of the revenues coming in, and what's available after credit enhancement agreement payments. You see that on the top section. And then you see down below the specific projects by TIF districts and where those monies are going.
Excuse me, I just got a message from Counselor DeBrito that she's in the waiting room and presumably would like to be promoted.
Is it a different She's probably on the regular meeting one. Should text her, let her know, hop on the budget one.
Okay. She says she's on the budget Zoom.
So specific questions on TIF, we won't go through, again, this line by line, but it is broken out here again by TIF district. And you see the numbers both before and after CEA payments are doled out, what's left to work with.
To just add one comment to that, so the blue highlights that you see throughout the spreadsheet, those in individual columns, those are, those TIF districts can fund those projects. So,
Qualified expenses per.
yes, yep.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
When you say that, you're saying that it's limited, what the
Yes.
TIF money can be used for?
Yes, by district, yeah.
So it can be used for these items and other items
Just
that
these,
were not chosen?
just those categories.
Oh,
It's shaded in blue.
I understand that, but there aren't more that weren't funded?
Well, there are
This is
some-
like a separate little budget, right?
Do you want
I would say, yes, when you look at the numbers, under, let's say, the Alphon Commons, and you go down to where it says debt service, there was nothing put in that column to fund debt from Alphon. Could you? Yes, you could, because it's a blue category there. But that was utilized, if you go down farther, you'll see the Alphon money was being utilized for streets, roads, crosswalks, and in other categories. So we tried to find a balance of which TIFs they would fit under, and what is the goal of that TIF, and what were you trying to create? And so we tried to plug those numbers in according to those. So yes, there are other things that you could do with it, but you'd have to take it away from the categories where we put it.
Right. I understand that. Thank you.
Okay.
Are we double funding the AYCC here? One
No,
with
so that-
capital and then one with
Right.
TIF?
So that payment to the AYCC is coming out of TIF. The payment you see in the budget is TIF.
This is showing you the source of those items.
Right.
Okay, so it's not a very clear way to do it, and I've been struggling with that for the 2 years that I've been here. This is, Christina, I'll give her the credit for creating this sheet, which is much clearer than it has been for the last couple of years. But I think we're gonna improve it again next year as well, so that we'll show within individual budgets.
In the line
budgets.
items.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just a highlighted cell or something.
Yes, all this is in here.
I would only add that the TIF funds are separate funds.
I understand.
And so when he pulls it in, he does it much like, you'll see it on the front page, his summaries there. He pulls it in as TIF funds and what's brought in. And this sheet just shows you what that total is made up of. That's all.
It's a pretty clunky way to do it. There's a better way, I think, to do it. Just keep making improvements each year, I think, with how the budget looks, so that it's easier to understand for everybody.
Right, because I think in previous years, the source was included right in the budget line.
Not since I've been here.
Okay. Because then you have to tie back
Right,
what's in the TIF budget to what's in the, yeah.
right, and we
Right.
want to do what you're suggesting.
Yeah,
Is that
okay.
it'll show in each, so in administration for AYCC, it would show the
Right.
expense there, but it would show the use of TIF revenue within that budget.
Right,
They
right.
could just be a highlighted cell, something like
There's
that.
To make the worksheet, the budget workbook work, we have to do it certain ways to make sure that it balances out, so. And it pulls into all the summary sheets so that we have a number we can work with.
So does this sheet show increases in the amount of TIF funding? I haven't dug in yet, but from one year to the next? Or would,
It doesn't really show that.
okay,
Yeah. It just shows you what we've got for a balance as of,
right,
yeah, and then what we're projecting as of June 30th, 2024, what we expect for a balance within that each TIF district, the projected TIF revenue, and again, it's projected because it's all based on what the tax rate is. So as the tax rate changes, the amount coming into that TIF is going to change as well. So
Yeah. Right.
it's a fluid amount, and we don't know until after the tax rate is set in August.
right.
Do you have a sense of the scale of upcoming potential TIFs? I mean, we have all this stuff that's going in off of Temple in front here. I'm imagining that's going to be a TIF that covers that, or maybe not, I don't know. Like, what
I
are
don't think
the,
we've received anything.
We haven't received any applications yet for TIFs. We have two that I know of, new ones that are being discussed, but we haven't received any formal applications yet for them. So,
Rebecca, I find the sheet that I did on the individual TIFs with the different years on them and the increases might be the easiest way to pull what that increase was from one year to another.
yeah, and that's not included in their budget binders. That,
It's not, it's what was going to the finance committee.
Right.
right.
We can give that to, yeah.
I realize on page 3, though, there is a comparison year to year on what the use of TIF funds is, so.
Yes.
So that's helpful.
Yeah, the aggregate,
Right, yeah,
but not for the
the
individual.
aggregate, yeah,
Yeah,
right,
but not for the individual
exactly.
TIFs.
okay.
All right, anything else on TIFs? Good. Before we conclude this, I just want to follow, we did have one question at our last meeting, it may have been from Counselor Finch, regarding photocopiers, miscellaneous revenue in the clerk's office. That was you, correct? Okay, here's your, that includes professional services, including legal instruments, notary services, and photocopies.
And it was broken out from another line. There was one line in her budget that said miscellaneous revenue. So we basically took some of that, identified what it was, and put it in that line.
All right, we'll do this again on Thursday.